Hey, I'm Stephanie, and it's time for my 22 in 22 Project Pan update with speed reviews and swatches. Welcome to part 1 of my 22 in 22 Project Pan update for items that I used during the month of May. If you're new here, I will include a link to my Project Pan playlist in the show notes just in case you'd like to catch up. But if you'd like to just jump right in, here's the premise of the project. This is a rolling style usage-based project pan. Each month, I focus on using 22 products 22 times within 2 months. And the goal of me doing that is to do a real deep dive into my makeup collection to really get to know each individual item really well. My updates come in 2 installments just because it's a lot of products to talk about. And so part 1, which is today, is usually my rollouts where I talk about everything that I hit my usage goal on, and I include speed reviews. Part 2, which will be my next video, is always my roll-ins for the month. I always leave timestamps in the show notes to create chapters so you can simply skip to the content that's most relevant for you. I've got a lot of rollouts this month, so let's jump right in. If you happen to see me looking down or to the side during this video, it's just because I've got my notebook here, I've got some notes posted here, and I also have my makeup bag here. So I promise I'm focused. There's just a lot going on. So let's start with my Makeup Forever Step 1 primer. I just had like a little sample of it. I used it 25 times and then it was gone. I think this actually might be discontinued because I think they reformulated them. So I'll keep the review short and sweet. It did what it said. It calls itself a smoothing primer. I feel like it did that. However, I don't feel like the difference was miraculous. Like, I saw a difference. It was nice. It worked, but it didn't blow me away. Next up is my RCMA KA Foundation palette. This one. I put this in the project because I hadn't used it in a long time. This was the thing I used to take with me on tour, and because, I hadn't been on tour in a while, I hadn't used it in a while. So I thought now would be a perfect time to break it back out in a project pan and get reacquainted with it. So that's what I did, and I'm so glad I chose to put this in here because I was reminded how cool this is. These foundations in here, they're very pigmented. So a little goes a very long way. But the good thing is they can be sheared out. So if I want just a sheer wash of color just for very light coverage, I can do that. If I need to spot conceal, I can do that. If I want fuller coverage, I can do that because this is just so flexible. It's made for makeup artists, so it's kind of logical that it would be made that way. The thing that really positively surprised me about this palette is I had forgotten what a good under-eye concealer this is. And if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that the current bane of my makeup existence is my under eyes. And this palette made them look pretty spectacular. This is one of the best solutions I've ever found. This and the Kosas Revealer Concealer, I feel like are really excellent. I feel, though, that the secret to getting this to work as a concealer was this brush. This is the Esom T37, and this was like the magic combination. The one thing that I'm not crazy about with this palette is the fact that it tends to take more time. I can get exactly the results that I want. It looks beautiful, but because there are several different shades in here, I'm always tempted to go in and like contour and highlight my face and do some shaping with it. For my under eyes, it takes a little bit more time to work into the skin just because it's not a liquid. So I guess the one disadvantage I'd say is that it's more time consuming than other foundations or concealers, but the end result is kind of worth it. Next, we have 2 eyeshadow primers. Just for context's sake, in case you're new, my eyes are just kind of difficult when it comes to eyeshadow. They're deep set, they're hooded, I've got oily lids. And so that means I basically need a primer if I don't want my eyeshadow to crease or fade throughout the day. So let's start with the Milani eyeshadow primer. I had it in my head that this was a dupe for the Urban Decay eyeshadow primer. And luckily, I was able to try the Urban Decay primer earlier this year for my project pan, and that one worked really well for me with a whole plethora of my eyeshadow palettes, so I was very happy with that one. Then I tried this one expecting the same results because I had it in my head that it was very similar, and apparently it's not, because even though it wasn't a catastrophe, it didn't hold up as well as the Urban Decay one does. And so I was a little bit sad because this one's more affordable, but I don't think this is horrible, but for my disastrous eyelids, it wasn't ideal. I also tried out the Kat Von D Color-correcting Eyeshadow Primer, and I was hoping that this would be a good travel dupe for my MAC Paint Pot in Soft Ochre. Because this is a pencil, I was hoping I could just kind of smear it on my lids and then use a finger, and then it would be easier to travel with. Color-wise, it was a good dupe for Soft Ochre. Opacity-wise, it was also a good dupe, but longevity-wise, it wasn't as good. This tended to crease more on my eyelids. It didn't always crease. And so it wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't as reliable as my Paint Pot is. And also, this one was a little bit more textured than that. I feel like this kind of left a strange kind of powdery, almost streaky finish on my lids. And so, like, even though this is okay, like, it's solid, it doesn't match the Paint Pot. So this is the sort of thing like I could imagine using up, but like if I had to have a really reliable choice, I'd always have to go with the Paint Pot. I also had 2 eyeliners this time around, a gel pot liner from Lethal Cosmetics and a normal pencil eyeliner from Urban Decay. So let's start with the Lethal Cosmetics gel liner. I was using the color BPM, this very pink color, and I used this as a gel liner for my lash line. I used it in the waterline. I used it on my lids as a cream shadow and an eyeshadow base, and I even used it on my cheeks as a cream blush. When it comes to using it as an eyeliner, it looks beautiful. It's very pigmented. The opacity is very high, so a little goes a long way. It's very effective and it stays all day. When I use it as a cream shadow, I like to take a fluffy eyeshadow brush and just kind of like rub it around in there and then brush it onto my eye in a very thin layer. And then that ensures great staying power, and this punchy color really comes through if I want it to. When I was using it as a cream blush, I tended to use my finger to do it, and it could get a little bit patchy if I wasn't careful. But the reality is this isn't a cream blush, this is a gel liner. So the fact that it still looked beautiful is kind of just an added boon. So I'm a big fan of the Lethal Cosmetics gel liner. And I used my Urban Decay 24/7 Glide On Eye Pencil in the shade LSD 22 times. This is a very blue shimmery shade, and it kind of has like a navy blue base and then like some more royal blue, kind of like a more vivid shimmer on top. And I really like that because it draws some light into the eye, even though it is a darker color. And I actually loved pairing these two. Like if I used this one and then put this one over it and kind of mixed them a little bit, it would almost be like a purpley bluish base. This was an ideal combination. I got some very pretty looks with these. So I very much enjoyed this. The Urban Decay Glide On Eye Pencils are one of my favorite formulas. Next up is my Lancôme L'Absolute Rouge lipstick in the shade Rose New, which I believe is shade 6. I used this 23 times. It is a pink lipstick. Now, I am a nude lipstick girl, so pink is like a little bit on the wild side for me, even if it's not like an in-your-face pink. And so I was kind of like wondering if I was going to be comfortable wearing this, but it turns out I was. Even though I'm not a pink girl, I say this as I'm wearing a pink tank top. I do feel like this is a pretty shade on me. And I feel like, you know, the combination with like my skin tone, my eye color, and my blonde hair looks really nice. So color-wise, I think if I'm going to have a pink lipstick, this is like a nice one to have. Formula-wise, I think it looked really nice. It's kind of like a glossy, creamy finish. So even when my lips were dry, I could use this and my lips would look nice. But I did notice that like when my lips were feeling dry and I used this, they would feel even drier afterwards. Like a lot of times lipsticks will have kind of nourishing ingredients in them as well nowadays. This one doesn't do that. I almost feel like it has something in it that might even be slightly drying to my lips over the long term. It's nothing like, you know, a liquid lipstick or anything, but I feel like the formula might have a tendency to dry my lips out a little bit. So this is the sort of formula I don't think I would purchase again, but because I like the color so much, I would like to try to get some more use out of it. My brow product for the month was this Viseart brow palette, which consists of 3 different colored waxes and then 9 different brow powders in different depths and intensities and shades. I like this because it means that I can do all sorts of different things with my brows. But to be honest, I don't think this is like an everyday brow palette for most people. I think it's great for makeup artists. I think it's great for people like me who are sometimes doing very different looks for the stage. But like, this isn't necessarily like an everyday brow palette just for one person, because I mean, there's a lot of different shades in here. I had a lot of fun using it. I used every single shade in this palette and I enjoyed it. I tend to get soft looks whenever I use a brow powder, so I also got softer looks with these, even though there are the waxes to give you a little bit of structure and hold. I find for the most part, my brows always looked pretty soft, but they looked pretty. So I enjoyed using it this month. I also had a second primer in the project, the It's Skin Power 10 Formula PO Perfector. It's okay. It kind of does what it says. It says that it's pore tightening. I don't believe that's a real thing. It does slightly minimize the appearance of my pores, but not to the extent that it's like worth paying money for it. I feel like the effect is there, but very minimal. I do feel like makeup goes on very nicely over it. I do feel like it's generally a nice primer, but it's also fragranced, and this is more strongly fragranced than the Makeup Forever one I talked about in the beginning, and I'm just not crazy about that, like, because this really does smell very perfumey, and the smell kind of lingers for a little bit, so not crazy about that. So it works well enough for me to use it up, but I don't think it's worth paying for. I also had 2 concealers in my project this month because I was doing a head-to-head comparison. These 2 concealers seem very similar to me, or at least they did before I started this project, and so I wanted to see how similar they really are. What I'll say is that the Dior Forever Skin Correct concealer feels more like a serum, and it has a slightly more radiant finish. The Lancôme Teint Idole Ultra Wear All Over concealer, this one has a consistency almost like water. It's very thin, but the coverage is amazingly high for how thin it is. This one is less radiant. I would almost say that it's matte, but like if I think back to like the Tarte concealer and the way that one looks, that one is matte. This one isn't quite as matte as that one. So I feel like this one might be easier for more mature under eyes. The main differences are this one is a little bit heavier and a little bit more radiant. This one is very lightweight and more matte. But it took me 22 times of using these to really settle on the differences, so take that for what it's worth. I also had a second foundation in this project. It was the Laura Geller The Real Deal Foundation Stick in the shade Medium. I used this 19 times, and yet I'm still rolling it out. The reason why is because my skin is reacting to it. It took me a while to narrow it down because I am using a lot of different face products, but in the end, I noticed I was getting like weird bumps on my forehead and on my cheeks, and so I narrowed it down. It turns out this was the culprit. This just didn't work for my skin. However, I can still tell you how it looked as a foundation. When I initially put this on every morning, no matter how I put it on, with my fingers, with a sponge, with a brush, I really wasn't that impressed with it. It looked kind of heavy and cakey and just like not nice. I felt like it emphasized my pores, it emphasized texture. But what I noticed was that throughout the day, as I wore it, it started looking better and better. And by the end of the day, the texture of my skin would look stellar. So I feel like this might be better for people with oilier skin than what I have, because like especially in my T-zone, it would look marvelous. So it's not for me, but I'm sure it's for someone. I'm going to rehome this. I also had a liquid bronzer in this project, the Benefit Do the Hula Liquid Bronzer. I initially put it in this project because I was like, I remember using this and not liking it. And so I was convinced that I was going to put it in this project and then like just be able to declutter it in the end. And that's not what happened. What I didn't like about this, now I remember, is the fragrance. It literally smells like perfume. Like when I put this on my skin, it's like wearing perfume. So I'm really not crazy about that. But when it comes to the color and when it comes to the finish on my skin tone, it looks great. The closest thing I think it comes to is the Chanel cream bronzer that everybody seems to love, because both of them have kind of like a soft focus sheen. And this one is a little bit more intense than that one, like the shine, but it's still very soft focus, very natural. It's not like wet looking. It's just it's like an inner juiciness that kind of shines through. So I actually ended up being really impressed by the way this one looked. It is really easy to use, especially with a sponge. And so I'm gonna keep it. It's too pretty. This next one makes me a little bit sad because it's from Bite Beauty and they're going out of business. It's the Bite Beauty Multistick in the shade Cashew, and I used it 23 times. Their multisticks are created to use anywhere on the face. So as a cream eyeshadow, as a blush, as a lipstick. And as you can see, this shade is, it's easy to use on any of those parts of the face. I personally find this best used on the brow bone as a contour or on the cheeks. A lot of times what I would do is I would put it on like the lower part of my cheek down here to kind of contour, and I would put a brighter color on top. So I'd kind of do like blush draping and contouring with my blush that way. This is a little bit too cool for me to wear on my lips, I feel like. But what I did do is use it as a contour. I'd kind of just put it on the very bottom of my bottom lip to kind of create a little bit of a shadow illusion there. And it was nice for that. When it comes to blendability, it's very blendable because it's like a very silicone-y formula. But I feel like exactly that thing that makes it blend out so easily also kind of hinders the staying power a bit. The cream highlight I had in my project this month was a real win, and I was reminded of why it's such a longtime favorite of mine. It's the MAC Cream Color Base in the shade Hush, and I used it 22 times. The formula of this is super easy to use. You just swirl your finger in, tap it on wherever you want it, on the high points of your cheek. Doesn't remove your foundation, it sets down, and it leaves you with a beautiful soft focus finish. Very soft, very natural, very beautiful. And I really like the shade of this. I'm light toned skin I'm mostly neutral, but I'm slightly warm leaning. And this color is pink, but it's like a very light, non-intrusive pink. It's also neutral, but just ever so slightly warm leaning. And when I put this on, it melds with my skin color in such a nice, natural way that this is probably my ideal highlighter tone. I really enjoy it. I was so glad I got to use it this month. If you saw my last Partners in Cream Project Pan update with the award ceremony in it, you'll already have seen the packaging of this product because this was the Golden Compact. It's the Zeesea Palace Identity blush. I used it 22 times and I finally got to know it. This blush, I would say, is nice. It's not the best blush I've ever tried, but it's by far not the worst. It comes with 3 colors. There's like a kind of terracotta color, kind of a muted coral color, and a white shade that I guess you could use as a highlight. They all have kind of like a natural kind of sheen to them, but it's not like a super shiny sort of blush. The one thing is you'd think that you get 3 colors in here, and you do, but because of how they're placed in the pan, it's pretty much impossible to use just one shade. So you always end up getting a mix of the 3 when you're actually using it to apply it to your face. So I always end up with a very kind of like terracotta leaning coral color, if that makes any sense. The sheen on my cheeks is very nice. This blush is surprisingly pigmented. It's finely milled, relatively hard pressed. So like there's not like a lot of fallout. It's not a very powdery blush. But when you put it on, it is quite pigmented. So a little goes a long way, and I tend to use this with a fluffy brush. I wasn't blown away by it, by the color or by the finish. I thought it was very nice. Like, it's a nice blush to have. If you're looking for a coral colored blush with, I'd say like a natural radiance, so it's not like highlighty at all, it's not going to emphasize texture, then this is fine. But like, it didn't blow my mind. The packaging, however, makes a great prop. This next product was a real wild card for me. I didn't know what to expect. It's the YSL Touche Éclat Blur Perfector, which I used a total of 22 times. This is a really weird product. It's basically just like silicone in a pan. And I think you're supposed to use it like powder, but I'm not sure. I think this can be used as a primer, so underneath your foundation, but it can also be used as a powder over top. And it's supposed to just kind of like blur texture and reduce shine. And even though it's a weird product, it kind of works. I only ever used very thin layers of this because I was very nervous to ruin my makeup, but it never did ruin my makeup when I used it in a thin layer. And I ended up liking it so much that I took it, I started taking it with me to jobs. So when I'm on stage, in between sets, sometimes I have time to touch up my makeup. And this was one of the items that I brought with me to do that. And I think it worked really well. It was also very easy to use because it's not a powder. I could just wash my hands, go in, just kind of tap it on. And then, it just like, I can even do it now, reduce some of the shine on my nose, between my eyes, here in my T-zone, just a little bit. And it doesn't look heavy or cakey like a powder potentially can. It just works really nicely. And then I could just go. It didn't need a brush, didn't need a powder puff. It was really easy. So I ended up really being surprised at how much I liked this. Next up is a powder bronzer. And this month I was using the Guerlain Terracotta bronzer in the shade 3. I used it 24 times in total, and I really enjoyed this one. It's a very finely milled, soft powder. It's relatively hard pressed. So like, it's not super powdery. It feels really silky when you either touch it or when you apply it to your face. It's got, when I look at it in the pan, almost like tiny, itsy bitsy, teeny weeny micro glitters in it, but you do not see them on the cheek when you apply it to your face. You just end up with a nice soft sheen. And so I really liked warming up my face with this. I had a lot of fun with it. Was glad I got to use it, and it's definitely a keeper. The powder highlight I had in this month's project was actually a blush. It was the Physicians Formula Butter Blush in the shade Natural Glow. The reason I decided to take this and use it as a highlight is because it is a very pale pink and it's got a very golden sheen, like almost like a slightly orangey golden sheen. And so I just thought like it's more of a highlight. And I knew I was going on vacation and I was going to get a little bit bronzy. And so I thought that this would actually make a really nice highlight once I got a little bit of a tan. And I was right. The shade was definitely nice for that. But what I noticed is that like the base is kind of a nice warm pink, but there's a sheen to it that's a gold. And that gold, if I used this highlighter with a brush, would kind of emphasize the texture up in here. And so I was thinking, maybe I don't like this. Like in general, maybe it's just not a good cheek product for me. But then I started applying it with my finger instead, and it was beautiful. This is now the second powder highlight that I have found looks better when I apply it with my little finger sausages instead of a brush. And so I'm beginning to wonder if like that's my jam. Anyway, I used this 23 times, and I would say like it's nice. Not my favorite of all time, but nice. And it smells like vacation. I had 2 eyeshadow palettes in my project this month, the first of which was the Too Faced Born This Way The Natural Nudes palette. I originally put this in this project because I already knew that I loved the mattes. They're very finely milled, soft and silky, so easy to blend out. They work really well, really enjoy them. But what I wasn't sure about was the shimmers. And I think the reason is because I had one other Too Faced palette. I think it was the Natural Eyes palette, and my favorite eyeshadow of all time is from that palette. I think it's called the shade Silk Teddy. I adore that shade because it makes your eyelids look like silk. And that particular color is perfect for my skin tone, like just as an all over the lid shadow. And so like, it's my favorite shadow. I love it so much. Like I kind of want to get the palette again just to get more of that shadow. And I think when I got this palette, I was kind of expecting the shimmers, at least some of them, to have that beautiful satiny finish. And they don't. They're all very textured. And I think that's actually the only thing, is that like I went into it with the wrong expectations. All of the shadows are textured, a little bit chunky. They can give you a little bit of fallout when you use them, but they're nice. You can get some really high impact. You can get some beautiful textured looks. So like all in all, the problem was with my mindset and not with the palette. And now I'm a fan. And the second palette I got to play with this month was a palette of singles from Lethal Cosmetics. I basically took all of the colorful shadows I had from Lethal and just put them into this palette to get to know the formulas better. So I have matte shades, metallic shades, and sparkling metallic shades. The matte shades are beautiful. They work well. You can get a very very high impact look. You can blend them out really well. So I think they're excellent. They're not my favorite. Viseart still has that spot when it comes to the mattes, but I do think they are very nice. And any look I wanted to get, whether I was going for something subtle or something high impact, I was able to do really easily with these. So I enjoyed that. The metallic formula is also really nice, but I didn't feel like it like blew my mind. Like they worked really well, and I didn't have any problems with them. But I feel like metallic shades, it's kind of easy to find really good metallics. Where I think Lethal really shines is their shades. Like this is just the teeniest, tiniest selection of their colorful shades. I feel like they have every tone, every nuance. They have so many different colors. It's kind of amazing. So that's where I think they really shine. And in their sparkling metallic formula, I have 3 of those shades. This one is Evoke. This one is Talisman, and this one is Synth. And these 3 shades are my favorites. They surprised me. They are special. They're duochromes, but it's like they've got like a really nice kind of sheer colored base with a different color sparkle in them. And I feel like some of the Huda Beauty shades that I really like, some of the more glittery ones, I like them so much, but they kind of have a little bit too much fallout for me, and they're almost too high impact. These are like the perfect amount of impact with very little fallout, and I am a huge fan. Like I want to get all of the sparkling metallic shadows from Lethal because I'm so impressed with them. Like I think it's one of my favorite formulas. Viseart mattes and the sparkling metallics from Lethal. They're so good. We're down to the home stretch. Just 2 more products, both for the lips. We'll start off with this one. It is the Pure Illumination Light Up Lip Plumping Gloss in the shade Pink Silk. I used this one 22 times. This was decluttered to me from my mother, and it kind of reminded me of this lip plumper from Dior. This one I purchased myself. This one was decluttered to me from my mom. I thought they looked kind of similar. So since I did this one last month, I thought it'd be interesting to try this one this month so I could do like a very direct comparison. And so that's what I did. This one, just the packaging itself is like almost a little bit gimmicky. There's a little mirror on the back, and the applicator has a button on it. And when you click the button, there's a little light. So you can apply your lip gloss in a dark alley, as one does. So yeah, like interesting. You know, if you're in like a nice romantic candlelit restaurant and you want to make sure your lips are looking juicy for your lover, I guess that's a great option. Color-wise, it was a little bit light for me, and I found that the formula was relatively thick, and it kind of would get stuck in my fine lines of my lips, so I'd have to like pat it out. Once I did that, it was fine. Lip plumping-wise, it worked. It's a mild lip plumper. It does not hurt at all. It doesn't even really tingle, but it does have a plumping effect. The smell is like a sweet mint candy, but the mint is very faint. It's almost like a vanilla mint. When I compare it to this one, the smell is more minty. And this one, the Dior Lip Maximizer, is more sheer. This is almost like a clear gloss, actually, whereas this one is a very pigmented light pink gloss. To be honest, I think the Dior Lip Maximizer suits me a little bit better, so I have to decide whether it's worth keeping both of them. And the very last product is a liquid lipstick. So to be honest, I was kind of dreading this. It is the L'Oreal Liquid Lipstick in the shade 117. I used it 22 times. And to be honest, this was not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. I was remembering liquid lipsticks as being these extremely like life-sucking, drying products that just made your lips look like a desert. And I was just like really not into that. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a try. We'll see how it works. And it turns out it's not nearly as bad as I remember liquid lipsticks being. Yes, it is drying. That is the nature of a liquid lipstick. But this one was actually okay. When it dries down, it remains just a teeny tiny bit sticky. I'd say like it sets 98% of the way, and then like it's like 2% sticky. And that feeling wasn't that great because like every time I closed my lips, they would kind of stick together just a little bit. But the good thing is at the other end of the the product, there's like this little lip gloss thing, and you can use this to put it over top, and it hydrates your lips a little bit more. It makes the lips look a little bit juicier. It makes it more comfortable to wear, and it adds some slip so you don't get that stickiness anymore. So all in all, this ended up being a pretty comfortable solution when it comes to liquid lipsticks. Where it really impressed me was that I wore this during a show. I decided I would put it to the test. When I sing, I tend to get really close to the microphone, and so a lot of times my lips will brush the tip of the microphone. And whenever that happens, like a lot of lipsticks, it'll just kind of get taken off right in the center of my bottom lip. And that did not happen with this one. So I was actually pretty impressed by this. And the other thing was that it's a neutral color. So when it did fade, it faded really nicely. So this is actually a keeper for me. And I'm kind of surprised at that. Not my favorite lipstick, just because liquid lipsticks aren't my favorite in general. But like as far as liquid lipsticks go, like it's good. Now that I've hit my usage goal on all of those products, it means I get to roll in a whole bunch of new cosmetics. But I'm not going to talk about that today. I will save that for my next video. So if you enjoyed today's part 1 and you don't want to miss part 2, make sure you subscribe to my channel and give this video a like to see more. If you have any questions or thoughts about the makeup I mentioned today, feel free to let me know in the comments because I do love to hear from you. Other than that, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a wonderful week and that we can all remember that even stumbling can be a form of moving forward. So let's stumble in style.